As far as the savanna vegetation is concerned, the savanna landscape is typified by the tall grass and short trees. It is rather misleading to call savanna tropical grassland because trees are always present with the luxuriant tall grass. As we just discussed, I discussed how exactly these, uh, these the equatorial, how this equatorial forests get themselves converted into grassland. So first, we have a like we discuss, like you have a first you have a woodland savanna where the density of big trees is more compared to the grass. Then you have parkland savanna where the density of tree decreases. So the grass will be more in these places compared to the woodland savanna, and ultimately all the land will be having only grass. But some here and there, some tree will be scattered among these grasses. So that's why it is misleading to call these savanna tropical grassland because the trees are always present with the luxuriant grass. So these are tall grass. The terms parkland or bushveld perhaps describe the landscape better. That's what we have already discussed. The trees grow best towards the equatorial humid latitude or along the river bank. Why? Because trees grows best towards the equator because the precipitation, as we have discussed, that the precipitation keep on decreasing as you move away from the equator towards the pole. So that's why the density of the trees increases towards the equator, humid latitude, or along the river bank, because along the river bank also they have a good amount of water availability, but decreases in height and density away from the equator. They they occur in clumps or as a scattered individual. The trees are deciduous. We have already talked about because these are here you have a dry season. That's why the tree has to shed their leaves in the cool dry season. These things we have already discussed to prevent excessive loss of water through the transpiration. Example, acacia. Other have a broad trunk with water storing devices to survive the through the prolonged drought, such as baobabs and bottle trees. Trees are mostly hard gran, gran, these trees are mostly hard and grand and thorny and may exclude gum like gum arabica. Many trees are umbrella shaped, exposing only a narrow shape to the strong wind. Palm which can withstand the drought are confined to wettest areas or along the river. Vegetative luxuriance reaches its peak in the rainy season when the trees renew their foliage and flower. In true savanna land, the grass is tall and coarse, growing 6 to 12 feet high. The elephant grass may attain a height of even 50 feet. Basically, in this, because these areas also suffer from the drought period, that's why the plant are deciduous in nature. And this plant has actually uh, adopt, actually devised many mechanisms through which they can withstand the drought condition in these areas. We will talk about all these mechanisms through which they can withstand this drought condition in the savanna. So the grass tend to grow in a compact tuft and has a long roots with which reach down in search of water. It appears greenish and well nourished in the rainy season but turns yellow and dies down in the dry season that follows. The grass lie dormant throughout the long rainless period and spring up again in the next rainy seasons. In between the short tall grass are scattered short tree and low bushes. As the rainfall diminished towards the desert, the savanna merged into thorny scrubs. In Australia, the scrubland is particularly well represented by a number of species like Mali, Mulga, Spinfax grass, and other bushes. So basically, if you see in these areas, then the plant basically has adapted to deciduous uh, habit. Because there are two types of plant in these areas. The first type is known as generally in this area they are known as perennial plant. So perennial plant means they remain alive throughout the year. So when they have to remain alive throughout the year, then definitely they have to adapt to some kind of mechanism through which they can actually they can withstand the drought condition in these places. So some are umbrella shaped, some has become umbrella shaped. So when they have umbrella, then this part of this plant is not exposed directly to the sun. That's how they can preserve the water. Some are having a water storing devices. They can store the water in this body itself. Some are so watery that if you poke some pipe in this inside this, then the water will start coming from the pipe. So they are so juicy basically that the water will start coming from through this pipe. Then these some of these this perennial plant has they have to shade their leaf in order to preserve the water. So they have devised this this mechanism through which they can prevent the loss of water. Then some are have a very deep roots or widespread roots, so that they can get water from as much area as possible. So that's how they have long and widespread roots. These are basically the some plant has their leaf. Some have very thorny leaves. Their leaf has got converted into thorns. That's how they can preserve the water from getting transpired. So that's how they can they have adapted to this mechanism. Then some are ephemerals. Some are ephemerals. Ephemerals means they basically mm, they basically actually remain dormant during the dry season, and they will spring up as soon as the rainfall starts. So these are called as ephemerals because they cannot remain um, what we call it, they cannot remain uh, during the they cannot sustain during the drought period. That's why they will remain in a dormant conditions, in dormant stage. And as soon as the rainfall will start taking place, then they will again spring up. And they will complete their cycle within a very short period of time, and ultimately they will again they will become dormant. So some of these plants has a basically they have their seeds covering with a thick layer so that these they can remain dormant throughout the dry seasons. So that's how they have adapted to this drought condition. So these, as we discussed, just that they remain dormant throughout the long rainless period and spring up again in the next rainy season. So that's how they have got themselves adapted to these dry conditions. Animal life of the savanna. We have talked about the fact that in the tropical area, in the equatorial hot and wet type of climate, because the canopy was so dense, there was no undergrowth. That's why most of the fauna will be found on the top of the tree. Because that's why here most of the fauna is climbers. They remain in the upper part of the tree. But because in the savanna, the density of the forest decreases, and that's why you have a lot of undergrowth like grasses, scrubs, and bushes. That's why in these places you will find herbivores which actually feed on these grasses. So that's how when the food availability is found on the ground, then you will find a lot of herbivores like deer and you know uh, cheetah, deer, all kind of these herbivores will be found in these places. When you have a herbivore, then definitely the carnivores also will be present here, who will feed on these herbivores. So that's why it is known as big game country, because it's a home of a wild animal. It is known as the big game country. The thousands of animals are trapped and killed each year by people from all over the world. Some of the animals are tracked down for their skin, horn, tusk, bones, and hair. Others are captured alive and sent out of the Africa as a zoo animal, laboratory specimen, or the pets. So there is such wealth of animal life in Africa, that many of the animal film that we see at the cinema are actually taken in the savannah. So there are in fact two main group of animals in the savannah: grass-eating herbivores animals and the flesh-eating, the carnivore animals. The herbivore animals are often very alert and move swiftly. They are very alert and move swiftly from place to place in search of green pasture. They are endowed with a great speed to run away from the savage flesh eaters that are always after them. The leaf and grass eating animals include the zebra, antelope, giraffe, deer, gazelle, elephant, and oka, okapi. Many are well camouflaged uh, species, and their presence among the tall greenish-brown grass cannot be easily detected. Camouflaged means they can hide in the they can hide themselves in the jungle background, so easily they cannot be detected. The giraffe with such a long neck can locate its enemy at a great distance away, uh, while the elephant is so huge and strong that few animals will venture to come near it. It is well equipped with the tusk and trunk for defense. The carnivorous animals like lion, tiger, leopard, hyena, panther, jaguar, jackal, lynx, and the puma have powerful jaws and teeth for attacking other animals. Their natural coloring of the light yellowish brown, often with stripes like the tiger, or uh, spots like leopard, match perfectly with the downy background of the savanna. They often hide themselves in a shady spot up in the branches or amidst the tall bushes and many wild animals, as well as hunters themselves, are caught unaware in this manner. Along the river and in the marshy lakes are numerous species of reptiles and mammals, including crocodiles, alligators, monitors, and giant lizards, together with the uh, larger rhinoceros and hippopotamus. In such an animal paradise, there are many diverse species of birds, snakes, butterflies, moths, and insects. In many parts of the East and South Africa, national parks have been set up which control the killing of the animal. There is a necessity if many of the rare species of animal are to be preserved and protected from wanton shooting. In Kenya, there there are large hotels and viewing towers built in the heart of the savannah with special transport arrangement to bring tourists to see the animal. These areas are known as Masai Mara in this Kenya. Um, uh, this is a progressive step made in conserving the life of savanna and should be encouraged. So this is how exactly the animal life of the savanna, human life in the savanna, because you can understand that most of the human activities are also depends upon the type of resources found in a particular areas. Like we have already talked about when we were discussing about the equatorial hot and wet type of climate, because these forests are so dense that generally most of the people are engaged in either in hunting or food gathering, because other activities cannot be carried out here, and that's why these people are you know engaged in hunting or food gathering. In the same manner, you will see that how this resources has been responsible for the type of activity being carried out in a particular region. So within savanna, we have already seen that land of the tropics live many different types who are either cattle pastoralists like the Maasai of the East African Plateau or settled cultivators like the Hausa of northern Nigeria. Because in these areas, grasslands are available, that's why people actually are engaged in the uh, pastoralism. So, or these some of the tribes are settled, they practice settled agriculture, not the shifting cultivation, because we discussed in the equatorial forest, because the precipitation is very high, that's why the moment you cut the tree, then the soil actually get exhausted in terms of the nutrients, because when the precipitation takes place, then all the nutrients present in the soil get themselves leached down, making the soil infertile. So that is how exactly the problem is in the equatorial forest. But as we have talked about, that in the savanna, the precipitation is not as heavy as in the equatorial hot and wet type of climate. That's why the soil of this area also contain a lot of nutrients, and that is the reason why settled agriculture can be practiced. And these areas are very actually provide a great hope for the world, because if the population will increase, then these area can be cultivated. So that's how this we shall examine the life of these two group of people more closely and see how they adapt themselves to the savanna environment. So we will be discussing about the life of these two different type of people living in these areas to understand exactly what kind of life they actually live. So the Maasai are the nomadic tribes who once wandered with their herds of the cattle in the central highland of East Africa in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. At the height of their power in the mid 19th century, they numbered about 50,000, but today, after the centuries tribal clash, epidemic, and natural death, their number have been greatly reduced. They are now mainly confined to the 15,000 square mile of the Masai Reserve in Kenya and Tanzania. Their old grazing ground in Kenya highland were taken over first by the immigrants, white settlers, for for plantation agriculture and dairy farming, and later after the independence by African farmers. They now occupy the less peopled area of savanna in which are grazed something like a million cattle and perhaps twice as many uh, sheep and goats. On the lower slopes of the eastern African plateau, where rainfall is as low as 20 inches and there are long periods that the grass seldom reaches a foot height and is not nutritious. When there is a drought in the when there is a drought, the Maasai moves upward to the higher and cooler plateau region in which their herds can graze on a better pasture. They built circular huts with stick bushes and mud for the temporary shelter. The cattle are kept in a special enclosure at night and are protected from attack by wild and animal by strong fences. So they actually make their settlement in a circular manner, and here they actually in this circle they actually keep their kettles to protect in order to protect them from the wild animals. So that's how they make circular hutment. Now cattle kept by Masai are the Jebu cattle. The name of the cattle is Jebu cattle with the humps and long horns. They are treated with great respect and affection and are never slaughtered for food. So what exactly they do? They actually drink blood. The beef is only consumed when they die a natural death from the old age or the disease. They are never used as a draught animal and are kept entirely for the supply of milk and blood. So, milking is done by women before daybreak and at dusk. The yield is extremely low by any standard, unusually not more than 2 are obtained at a single milking. The milk is drunk either fresh or sour. Cheese making is still not known to the Maasai. Blood from the both bull and cow is drunk. This is obtained by tying a leather cord around the neck of an animal until the vein swells. A vein is then punctured by the special arrow head and the blood gushes out and is collected and drunk fresh or floated. Cattle are kept by every Maasai family. They are considered far more valuable than anything else and are the symbol of wealth. The richest man has the largest herd of the cattle. Leaving aside the sheep and goat, which two Maasai tribes are of little significance, cattle are used in payment for wives, and when the father of family dies, the mother divides the livestock among the son. The Maasai will not slaughter the cattle for food, so from the agriculture So from the agriculture, uh,